Hi, folks, with Tassos today. Tassos today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about South Africa and what's going on there, and then draw some parallels with what's happening in the West right now. Now, South Africa, before I should even go back in history even further here. The area of South Africa that was originally colonized, by the way, originally the Dutch, by the way, that was pretty much an uninhabited area. The soils weren't particularly fertile, and there was a port, a useful port there, Cape Town, which the Dutch used to revictual their ships on the way to the Dutch East Indies, which is today called Indonesia, which was a big producer of spices and so on back in the time. Now the Dutch were very, very industrious people, and they were experts at putting irrigation in and draining swamps, things like that. So they turned this fairly desolate, barren area into a very fertile area, growing lots of crops and running animals and so on. So it became a very productive area and was very useful for resupplying ships on the way to the East Indies, or coming back from the East Indies to Europe. The Dutch picked the wrong side in one of those European wars that were a big feature of European military conflict at the time, and they had to give up the South African, the Cape Town area to the British as compensation in one of these wars, and the British held on to it until independence. Now, the Dutch farmers were certainly a hardy stock, and then later on, gold and diamonds and other things were found in South Africa. So it made it a very, very rich area. Now, as the area became more affluent, and there was a demand for labour and everything, as the area became more affluent, more and more blacks from the north started moving into the area, and then there wasn't much pushback against against that from the local white, British and Dutch, and they were, they used the cheap labour, and as more blacks, the Bantus and various other tribes, were displaced by the conquering, very aggressive military Zulus, and they were displaced, they increasingly came into the white areas, looking to resettle, looking for work. So they weren't indigenous to the area at all, as was later claimed by activists. And but it wasn't long before the black population outnumbered the white population. Now, because of the tribal rivalries, the constant dramas, and the internecine warfare, and the black people still living a very tribal existence, they were kept separate from the white areas, and they needed travel papers and the like. Now, there were black people that were, deemed as sort of well behaved, that weren't running around trying to kill people or rob people or any, that sort of thing. And they moved freely around the place. There just wasn't that many of them. Now, this was viewed as an outrage by the activists, very stirred up by Marxist agitators, and the Soviet communists were very much in there, agitating their asses off to try and destabilize the South African state. The South Africans, then put in place more security measures. These security measures then pointed to, well, there you go, we told you they were all Hitler, and that's how it went. Now, if you look at movies of Cape Town or any, Johannesburg, any of the big cities or bigger, towns and cities around in South Africa in the 60s and 70s and so on, there you were lucky to see. I mean, there'd be some black people, but effectively it was a sort of a white-only enclave. Quite a high standard of living there. It was a rich country, per capita. But then the requirement for you got to, there are more blacks than whites, therefore you have to give government to the black people. Now, the argument that the white government put forward is these people aren't ready, they'll just destroy the place. Yeah, you fucking Nazi racist, just hand it over, damn Hitler. And so it was handed over, and South Africa is fast heading towards third world state. It's gone from being one of the richest countries in the world to plummeting down the the wealth scale, per capita wealth scale, and overall wealth scale. So they've even tried using all sorts of different measurements of what wealth is to try and make out South Africa's doing well, but it's not. And it's all the classic things, the classic things of when whites are removed from government, that the maintenance of public infrastructure, such as water treatment plants, electricity generation, water distribution and pumping stations, everything, all the infrastructure starts to decay, and including rail and all sorts of other things. And people, the black people, tend to live for today and believe that everything should be communally owned. So they think nothing of tearing a railway station to pieces and taking everything from it, because they own that railway station too. So why can't they take what they want? But then there's no railway station there. Well, okay, who cares? I've got mine. So the entire infrastructure's really going downhill. Now, any white person who can get out of the place is leaving. And whereas, the brightest, most mobile people were the first to leave. They saw the writing on the wall. The people that are leaving South Africa now are the mechanics and the nurses, who are covered in tattoos, white people. And they're trying to get out. And so anyone who can get out is getting out. And so the white population is increasingly, not all, but increasingly people who either have a reason to be there, they've got a good productive farm or something like that, or they've got no skills or anything, and they're going to not do so well if they want to get out of South Africa, because no one really wants them, apart from the fact they're white. Nobody really wants them. They've got no skills. So South Africa's going downhill at a rate of knots. Now, if you think gender and race quotas in the West and so on are playing a major role, then South Africa is years ahead of the curve on that one. And where whites are openly denied access to all sorts of services and things like that until and blacks are openly favoured, and there's no merit in it at all. It's simply it's not even equity. It's like it's equity plus compensation as well. So they've got this sort of taught mindset that the goodies and the gravy they were denied hundreds of years ago should also be compensated for today. So it's down to where they've got draft legislation saying, well, as white farms are more productive than black farms, white farmers are doing better, that the equity means that they have to deny white farmers water. So they have to deny them water for irrigating their crops and give that water to, or give far more water to the unproductive black farms in order to create equity. So rather than make the black farms more productive, they're trying to make the white farms less productive by artificial means. And that really sums up how they're running South Africa generally, that rather than improve the lot of the black people, they're trying to reduce the more productive outcomes for the white people who work harder and plan better and have more expertise and so on. So if we reduce how well the whites do, then we'll create equity by doing that. Now, that's not far off what's happening in the West now. We're creeping towards it fairly quickly, I think, but creeping towards it in the West. So, but this is what they're doing in South Africa. I mean, this idea is insanity here. Gee, those white farms are doing well. Those white farmers seem to be really good at what they're doing. I know. Let's not give them any water to irrigate their crops. So then the white farms won't do as good, which means that they'll be the same as the black farmers who are useless and incompetent at running a farm anyway. Now, no sort of sane government would ever do that. And if you look at sort of generally, like the apartheid people were, the apartheid government were, because of the amount of blacks they arrested each year. Look at the terrible thing. They're all fucking Hitler, Nazis, fashion. Look at the amount of black people they're arresting. There are now more black people being arrested by the black government than the whites were arresting. There's way more crime now than when the white government was in charge, and so by every measure, the South Africa is worse off. Now, if you look at the per capita income, when the blacks took over, they originally divvied out all the goodies to their buddies and so on. So there seemed to be, but there was quite a small elite that took the benefits of that. They did quite well, made themselves very, very rich. The Jacob Zumas and $20 million mansions and this sort of thing. So they made themselves very rich. But a lot of the average black person never really got any better. If you look at it now, relative to cost of living and delivery of services, blacks are now worse off than they were when the white government was in control. So that's what equity and quotas gives you. It gives you a reduced quality of life and a reduced living standard and reduced wealth all across the board. Now, it may be that they've made white people poorer, much poorer, much more quickly, but that's the most twisted form of equity you can imagine, because everybody's poorer. Now, if they'd made black people as wealthy as the white people, then that would have been one thing. But they destroyed all the productive infrastructure and industry and so on, and therefore the wealth was sucked out of the economy. So now everybody's poorer. Now, if we look at the West today, it drives me literally crazy when I go and visit clients and go to these meetings, how often now that I'm meeting people who are affirmative action appointments, women and non-white people. If I do meet a white person, particularly a white male in the job, then he's demonstrably a better quality than any of the affirmative action hires. But I'm seeing it less and less. Similarly, with contracts being awarded, even if it's a local government, things like that, or businesses, they've got an emphasis saying, no, we want a business that's owned only by women, or we want a business owned only by black people, or only by black women. And so they're awarding contracts not in any form of merit, but just on this ideological equity nonsense. Now, because of that, and I see it sort of at a micro level, but if you multiply it out across the board, it means a lower standard of living for us all. Whereas the business that I've got a share in, we can do, for example, we can do the job in a month for say $100. I'm just using round numbers. We can do the job in a month for $100. Now they give it to the black lesbian business, all in the interests of equity, and it's going to cost them $250, and it'll take 6 months. So we all end up paying for that. It's a lower quality job that's more expensive. Now, you could argue, but look, we're giving employment to black lesbians. Well, fine, but we're all poorer as a result. You'd be better off doing the more efficient gig, so then those resources that are freed up can go to more productive pursuits. But you're throwing money at unproductive pursuits or less productive pursuits, all in the interest of equity, and we all end up paying for that. And if you multiply the hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of instances every week or every day that are occurring across Australia or across the Western world, this pursuit of equity is reducing our standard of living for all of us. And if you look at it, just since the equity program started, the cost of the purchasing power of the paycheck has gone down at its fastest rate ever. So we're clearly all worse off as a result of this. And if you look at where South Africa's going, if you look at where they were 10 years ago in terms of their equity policies, it's about where the West is today. So when people say, look, if you want to look at how the West is going to turn out, just look at South Africa. Now, black people aren't even in the majority in the West. Black and brown people aren't even yet in the majority. But once they are, and they're the third world sort of peasant stock, once they are in the majority and they have this view of entitlement of we want whatever's there, you have to share it with us. But as the pie gets smaller and smaller and smaller, which it is, it's certainly in South Africa and in the West, as the pie gets smaller, then these people are still going to want their share of it. And before too long, as they're doing in South Africa now, say, well, we now don't want equality with the white people. We now want more than the white people have. And that is the new standard of equity in South Africa. And I see it's going to come here. And the need to crush white people and to view them as an irritation to the new globalist world order. So that need to crush white people, that isn't going to go away. That need, that demand to find Nazis and white supremacists everywhere, that's going to stay. And it's an inevitable next step that we're going to be put in a situation where, well, black people have to have equity with equity outcomes with white people. Well, no, black people have to have 120%. So equity plus 20% in their favour, because it's compensatory equity. And I think we're heading there very fast right now. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.